Just look at this baby. Isn't he cute? Wondering what he will be when he grows up? Let's see what Sigmund Freud has to say. Stay with me in this video and let's look at Freud's psychosexual development theory. But first, let's see the word sexual. Freud used this term to denote anything pleasurable, and the pleasure comes from the release of tension. The energy that drives us to pleasure is the libido. Initially, Freud conceived of the libido as purely sexual, meaning it's just associated with sexual activities. But subsequently, he broadened that concept to include all expressions of pleasure and self-preservation. So this includes sex, but it also includes other sources of pleasure. For example, don't you experience tension when you're hungry? This is because of the build-up of the libido. This energy accumulates and drives you to do something. So what do you do when you're hungry? Of course, you eat. The libido is then discharged and you experience relief of tension caused by hunger. That is pleasure. The same thing happens when you're thirsty. There's tension because of the build-up of libido. So what do? You drink, and the libido is discharged. And there's relief of tension, hence there's pleasure. The same process happens when you have sex, when you urinate, when you defecate, and when you do other things that relieve tension. So what is psychosexual development all about? It conveys the way that the libido builds up and is discharged as we mature. Although there are behaviors that are directed to obtaining pleasure that are common in all developmental stages, there are also differences, as you will see later. To better understand how a child develops to maturity, we have to understand the role of gratification and conflict. Gratification is the satisfaction of a desire, and the id demands gratification. But the id's demands are in conflict with social norms. Remember? If the id wants something, it wants it now and without consideration of consequences. Oh, my wants are immoral? I don't care. My wants are illegal? I don't care. My obtaining my wants will hurt you? I don't care. And by the way, I want my gratification to be met right now. That is the id. So, what happens now? To resolve the conflict between the id and social norms, the ego and the superego direct the need for gratification into socially acceptable channels. Remember, the id and social norms have conflicts. So what does the superego do? The superego imposes rules that the id should follow. Don't do this. Instead, do that. That's wrong. This is what's correct. But the id has its own demands and does not want to follow the demands of the superego. So, the ego has to step in to mediate between the demands of the id, the rules of the superego, and the realities of the situation, including social norms. And hopefully, this is going to resolve the conflict. Gratification centers in different body areas at different stages of development. These are called the erogenous zones. The erogenous zones can be a source of pleasure when the its demands are satisfied, but when the demands are not satisfied, they can be a source of frustration. Fixation can also happen. What is fixation? It is the inability to leave one state and proceed to the next. We may compare development to a long bus trip with stopovers. The final destination is maturity, and the stopovers are the developmental stages. Fixation is like getting stuck in a stopover, being left by the bus, and therefore not being able to reach the final destination. What causes fixation? This may be caused by frustration when needs are not adequately met. Going back to the analogy of a bus trip, you got out of the bus in one of the stopovers, excited to order from a restaurant that is known for its yummy, juicy burgers. But the staff said that you have to wait because they have run out of patties. You reply that you're willing to do so because you really love their burgers. The bus is leaving, but you refuse to board because you have not eaten a burger yet. The bus leaves and you are stuck there. In the same way, an infant who is not fed enough or who is frustrated with feeding may experience fixation. On the other hand, the opposite may also be responsible for causing fixation. It may be due to overindulgence, that his needs are so well satisfied that the person is reluctant to leave a stage. So back to the analogy. When you got off the bus, you got your burger and you loved it so much. It's the best burger in the world. You ordered another one, then another, and then still another one. The bus is leaving, but you decided to stay. Similarly, an infant who is overfed may become fixated. What are the stages of development? These are oral, anal, phallic, latent, and genital. To help you remember this, use the mnemonic old aged persons love grandchildren. The first stage is the oral stage. This is from birth to approximately 18 months. The erogenous zone, or the part where the libido is focused, is the mouth. That's why this is called the oral stage. The mouth is vital for eating, and the infant derives oral stimulation from gratifying activities such as sucking, biting, and chewing. The oral gratification also extends to the child's exploration of his environment by putting things into his mouth. You will notice babies put different things into their mouths: their fingers, their toes, toys, different objects. That's how they explore the environment. That's why this is called the oral stage. But babies experience their first conflict, and this is in the form of weaning. Babies want to continue breastfeeding or bottle feeding, but social norms demand otherwise. Have you ever heard of a 10-year-old still breastfeeding or bottle feeding? That's a big no-no, right? So, babies have to give in to the social demands in order to resolve this conflict, and they give up the breast or the bottle. Fixation may happen in the oral states when the baby is underfed, overfed, has frustrations with feeding, or is weaned too early or too abruptly. Fixation may lead to oral activities such as overeating, smoking, nail biting, and over-talkativeness. So, very obviously, these are oral in nature. But fixation may also be shown in behaviors associated with babies, such as dependence and aggression. The second stage is the anal stage. This is from 1 to 3 years. The erogenous zone is the anus and the child derives pleasure from defecating. But toilet training causes conflict. The child wants to immediately release tension by defecating, but his parents have a different idea. A conflict develops in which adults impose restrictions on when and where the child can defecate. This happens in toilet training, but the child realizes that although his parents demand that he defecates in the right circumstances, he, the child, has the power to decide when he is going to release his bowels. But ultimately, the child will adhere to social norms and the child becomes toilet trained. So the conflict gets resolved. The way parents approach toilet training can lead to two outcomes. Early or harsh training can cause an anal retentive personality. This is related to the pleasure of holding on to their feces when the parent insists that they get rid of it. They cannot let go. So, when they grow up, they become stingy, who are also unable to let go of their material possessions. They can also be obsessively tidy, punctual, and respectful to authority. On the other hand, liberal, inconsistent, or neglectful training can cause an anal expulsive personality, wherein the child may grow up being oversharing of his possessions. He can be messy, disorganized, and rebellious. The third stage is the phallic stage, which is from 3 to 6 years. Here, the libido is focused on the genitals, and the child becomes aware of sexual differences. Children become increasingly aware and interested in their genitals and may even explore them through masturbation. They also become interested in the genitals of the opposite sex and they begin to discover the differences between males and females. What happens to boys in the phallic stage? Well, the Oedipus complex happens. This was named after Oedipus, a Greek mythology character who killed his own father and married his own mother. Here, the boy desires his mother, sees his father as a rival, and wants to get rid of him. Such a terrible thought, right? But the boy thinks that if his father would discover this, his father would take away what he loves the most. And what does he love most at this point? It is his penis. So the boy develops castration anxiety. He resolves this conflict by repressing his incestuous desires and identifying with his father. If you can't beat your opponent, then be like him. Therefore, he adopts the masculine role. What about girls? The Electra complex is the counterpart of the Oedipus complex in girls. However, it was Carl Jung, not Sigmund Freud, who coined this term, and Freud was not in total agreement with him, so I am not using it. So what actually did Sigmund Freud say about girls during the phallic stage? The girl desires her mother but recognizes that she lacks a penis. Hence, she cannot possess her. This leads now to the phenomenon of penis envy, which is directed towards all males. She then transfers her sexual feelings to her father and blames her mother for her castrated state. This generates tension. To relieve tension, she represses her desire for her father and replaces her yearning for a penis with a desire to have a baby. She also identifies with her mother and therefore adopts the feminine role. So, what can happen when fixation occurs in the phallic stage? For both men and women, fixation may lead to future issues like sexual dysfunction or aggressiveness and problems with gender identity or informing relationships. Sexual dysfunction may happen because a person still desires the parent of the opposite sex and not the present partner. Problems with gender identity may happen because of failure to identify with the same sex parent. In men, fixation may lead to anxiety about sexual performance, so the man would be asking, was I good enough? In women, fixation may lead to the need for approval from males or a rivalry with other women. The next stage is latency stage, which is from 6 years to puberty. Latent means hidden, and this period is characterized by a relative calm. The libido is dormant, and sexual impulses are repressed. Instead, the focus shifts to other things such as social relationships and achievement of tasks. The child may focus on friendship with peers, schoolwork, hobbies, and similar concerns. Fixation may lead to difficulty forming social relationships or feelings of inadequacy. If a child fails to fit in with his peers, this could lead to feelings of isolation. If a child fails in doing tasks, for example, when he falls behind academically, the child may feel less competent than his peers. This can lead to feelings of insecurity and inadequacy. The next stage is the genital stage, which is from puberty to adulthood. Here, the libido reemerges. During the final stage of the psychosexual development, the individual develops a strong sexual interest in the opposite sex. This period marks the onset of sexual feelings. Unlike the phallic stage, the libido is directed towards heterosexual pleasure, not self-pleasure. This may lead to the teenager's first romantic and sexually intimate relationship. There may be unresolved conflicts during the genital stage, and what could be the effects of these conflicts? These conflicts may result to sexual dysfunction or sexual perversion or difficulty forming healthy sexual relationships. First, sexual dysfunction. This may take the form of rigidity or impotence, which means that the person may be unable to perform during the sexual act or may not be interested in the sexual act or may not enjoy the sexual act. What about sexual perversion? This may take the form of sexual activities with people other than members of the opposite sex. For Freud, the only normal sex is heterosexual. What about unhealthy sexual relationship? This may take the form of one that is focused simply on one's own sexual needs and disregards the needs of others. The genital stage extends throughout the adulthood of the person. Therefore, it is important that these conflicts be resolved.